Hello, my name is Ashley Diaz, and with me is Nicholas Willis. He is my friend that is familiar with multiple facets of literature, and he has familiarity with different regions of folklore that weren't specifically discussed in our class. We're going to be talking about the paper that I wrote in regards to women, their roles and portrayal as tricksters in folklore. The thesis of my paper is basically that women in folklore maintain a precarious balance of vulnerability and evil. Female characters that display trickster characteristics are portrayed in folklore as either more masculine or with predominantly evil traits in conjunction with their ability to be clever and cunning. Throughout my paper, I discuss the perspectives from various experts in their field that have studied female tricksters in folklore. But the conclusion for my paper states that tricksters allow cultures to explore a more deviant lifestyle than society accepts without the ramifications of performing the actual acts of deception. While male tricksters are congratulated and often rewarded for their masculine abilities of cunning, female tricksters are often vilified or defeminized for their conniving acts. This can be contributed to the patriarchal lens that dominates society's literature and dictates the expectations of women and what virtues are acceptable for them. The gender roles that are upheld in Western society stem from the interpretation of the Christian biblical text. The first female archetype that we can identify as a trickster could be considered Eve, tempting Adam with her feminine wiles to eat from the tree of knowledge. The female tricksters in folklore maintain a stigma of villainy or of being less feminine for their use of wit and deception. Female tricksters are often portrayed with promiscuity, which can be associated with female evil or villainy. Nicholas, in your response to what my paper said, you specifically started out with talking about Norse mythology regarding Valkyries and shield maidens.
Yes. To begin with, I think that Valkyries are another way of supporting what you're talking about. Instead of from the trickster aspect, though, from more of a warrior aspect. In Norse mythology, Valkyries were the beings that ferried warriors up to Valhalla. And they were always female, but they had lost much of these feminine qualities in becoming these warriors that would carry human warriors or men up to Valhalla. They were almost like an interpretation of angels, but in a more warrior-like way. And they also lost a lot of their feminine qualities in this process. Whereas shield maidens were still prided in their ability to be mothers, in their ability to rear children, and a lot of those aspects of being a woman, while also being notable warriors. They didn't have to lose these feminine qualities in order to become a noteworthy warrior on the battlefield. So I wanted to compare and contrast those, again, not from a trickster aspect, but from another warlike concept.
You also discussed the mythology behind Athena and her representation in Greek and Roman mythology.
Yes, so I brought that up primarily because the character Annabeth in Rick Riordan's books and later movies does not display this like her mother. But in that example, Athena in Greek mythology is still prided as a beautiful woman, but that's not the biggest reasons that people worshipped her or had any real pride in her. They prided her mostly on her cunning as a warrior and as a tactician. And then later on, when the Romans took over, they all but forgot about Athena, both as a woman and as a warrior. She was completely disregarded. So she lost much of that. And I think Rick Riordan did a wonderful job in displaying some of this in his fiction.
Well, I wanted to point out that especially in Greek day-to-day life, for worshiping and attributing things to Athena as the goddess of strategy and wisdom, they also revered her and her feminine form with their breastplates that they wore in battle to actually reflect the female figure. I just thought that that was an interesting thing for men to actually revere a woman physically.
Right, and that was primarily in the Greek, and of course that was all lost as soon as the Romans took over. But in many ways, she was also revered more so as a warrior than she was as a woman. And so that was part of my discussion, is that you couldn't always have both. You were either revering her as a woman or as a warrior. You couldn't do both simultaneously.
You also mentioned the immortal Nicholas Flamel series, the character of Pernell or
Pernelli Flamel.
Pernelli Flamel.
She's the wife of Nicholas Flamel, the protagonist of the story.
And you identified her as a powerful sorcerer?
Yes, she is, in no small terms, the most powerful character in the story, in as much as the protagonists. And many of the various enemies that they meet throughout the series are very weary of her, not just because of the raw power that she wields, but because she is considered to be very cunning. In most of the first few books, you very rarely hear any discussion of Pernell, as much as you hear discussion of this sorcerer or sorceress, as some refer to her, and how terrifying and cunning she is, and how no matter how far-reaching or how many years enemies would put into their plans, they couldn't always see through traps and well-laid plans that Pernell had gone through. And she manages to hold this kind of position while still being revered as a beautiful and immortal woman. And so she's never really vilified. She is terrifying, but I wouldn't classify those as the same thing.
Well, what I wanted to address specifically in your initial written response to my paper, you identified Pernell as a sorcerer, which, as was discussed in my paper, there is a distinct difference in gender identifiers. Whenever you hear the word trickster, you immediately assume a male figure. And my necessary ability to say female trickster makes you think of a woman. And one of the experts that I quoted, she actually coined the phrase trickstar in order to identify a female trickster. When you, even as a feminist yourself, identified Pernell as a sorcerer, you basically defeminized her in writing, in just your choice of words. So using the word sorceress and using the word trickstar would help society see that it's not just a male-dominated performance as a powerful figure and powerful characters. Do you agree?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from with that, yeah.
I just think that gender identifiers are actually helping our society portray women as powerful figures without having to be first and foremost thought of as, oh, this has to be a man.
Right. So whenever I wrote that response, referring to her as a sorcerer, that actually were that. That wasn't my words. That is how Michael Scott described her.
And that's what that's what I assumed as well. Is he described her as a sorcerer, therefore that is what you equate her as. And I think that once we take the step as a society in literature, in folklore, and in our modern works to identify powerful women as powerful women, that it's going to help with the aspects that I've been discussing in my paper. Thank you so much for your time, Nick. I really appreciate your views, and I hope everyone enjoyed our discussion.